Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Minecraft from the fog. And today, as you can see, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Obviously, because it's in VR, and also because this is a different world. Not only that, but I've also gone ahead and installed some shaders, which, now that I look at the effects, the beautiful leaves swaying on the trees, the way the fog rolls over the hills, I think that maybe we can carry this into the main series. But onto the main point. Today we're going to be exploring a map that's actually pretty special to me, and one that I've explored on the channel before. It's actually one of the first VR videos I've ever made. But never like this, never being stalked by ghosts that I now have quite a personal connection to. In a way, it's almost like a clashing of worlds. But for those who don't know, this is a map that I actually made almost a full decade ago in creative mode. It was right after I got out of high school, and I was kind of sitting around with nothing to do, and it was sort of around that time that I first consciously recognized the connection between creepy and comfy feelings. And so I sort of thought of a world that was horror-themed, but not necessarily horror-oriented. And so we got Misty Hollow. And as we have a look around, you'll see that it's sort of a residential sleepy street. Oh my god, that was like that one scare from Signs, when he looks out the window and it's standing on top of the barn. The way its glowing eyes were looking straight at me and it just turned and ran off into the fog. Oh, I can already tell this is going to be a cool one! Stop that! I'm trying to get through an intro here, jeez. But now that the rain has subsided, maybe we'll be able to... Okay. That has been our first triple tap. I don't think we've seen one of those before, but if this keeps up, I'm going to have to lower your frequency. This intro's kind of gone off the rails, so allow me to start fresh. The vibe I wanted from this map was a town locked in an eternal autumn. A place that captures those cozy feelings that you get leading up to Halloween. That time of year when the leaves start to brown and fall off, when they start showing Halloween specials from nostalgic kids shows, and where all the people are just kind of a bunch of eccentric weirdos, you know? Totally harmless, but still fun to be around. So in the interest of that, everybody here has kind of a family dwelling. All the villagers, although they do quite conspicuously seem to be missing since the last time I loaded up this map, have a name. You can see their name tags when you get close to them. They all have businesses in town and houses in here. And so I wanted to make it so that it was something sort of inspired by The Sims 2 on PSP. You know, the one where you had to go into this town and slowly learn the secrets that everyone was hiding. Unfortunately, I never did get as far as really fleshing any of those out, and so I kind of think that it might be a fun idea for a series at some point in the future to come back and continue this creative world. Now, I'm not going to be going through every single house and structure on the map, but all of them have this same basic idea, these sort of small, cozy spaces where you might be able to see yourself sitting by the fire or the window reading some creepy stories. Hello, we have a visitor. Sign says no solicitors. I wanted this map to have all kinds of things that, at a glance, just look like details. But if you were to look closer, you could maybe find a clue, which would lead you to another clue, which would lead you to another, ultimately culminating in you discovering secrets about both current and past residents of this town, and maybe even learning a little bit about its dark history. For example, we have this burned house on the corner, which would have led to something. The more I see what this map could have been, the more tempted I am to come back and work on it some more. Now, most of these houses don't really have anything of note in them, although many of the family names and other such things are references to classic horror media. However, there is something I want to point out on this street, and it's something that's weird, not just in terms of what the map is trying to get you to experience. It's actually kind of weird to me as well. So if we come into this house over here, whose residence is this? There's no sign on here, so I guess it's empty. You'll see we have the rooms off to the sides. There is sort of a secret, which allows you to get up to the attic. It's not much of a secret. And the idea of this was always kind of to have that one person, that family shame, locked away in the attic, left to create ghost stories when people catch a glimpse of them when they walk by on the street below. But that's not even the creepiest thing about this house. So if we come down here, I discovered this when I made the previous video a couple years back. If we look in this closet, there's a hole going down. And if we jump down here, it's like we're in these dark sewer-like things. Let's use the lantern to move ahead. Where's Liberty when you need her? And the thing that's so creepy to me about this little sewer thing, I have absolutely no recollection of building this. Seriously, I don't remember putting this here. It doesn't seem to lead anywhere of note. So, like, what's the point of this? When would I have done this? This is a world that I've barely touched, except on the most surface level, for like a decade. So, the way I see it, that leaves two possibilities. Either I'm spooking myself from the past, which is pretty weird on its own. Where does this go? Come on. Oh, this leads into the tunnel to the graveyard. Either that, or I didn't build this. And both of those possibilities just send shivers down my spine. It's so weird to go back to my own creation and not recognize something. I think that's the worst part. Something that should have been 100% under my control, having aspects that I'm just not familiar with. What is that down there? I can't. Every once in a while, I'll remember that I do have From the Fog enabled, and at any moment I might turn around to see some glowing eyes staring at me out of the shadows, but... It looks like there's a fence, and it goes even deeper. That's so weird. Well, daylight is here. Oh, and with this shader pack installed, that morning light is so beautiful. Oh, it makes me so happy to see it like this. Because to me, it makes it feel like I achieved the vibe I was going for. How it can make you feel like you want to snuggle up inside by the fire at night and walk around and smell the cool breeze and the smell of leaves on the air. Well, while we still have some daylight, let's head up over to the farm. Now, unfortunately, in this texture pack that we have now, this loses a little bit of what it had going for it, because the animals all used to be skeletons in my original Painterly pack. But now the regular animals will do just fine, I suppose. Oh, look at this view of the street that we get from here. Oh, and we can see one villager inside that house now. Okay, that's good. So I guess the residents haven't all completely vanished in the time that I've been away. Oh, this is absolutely gorgeous. This whole area is actually inspired by Herschel's farm on The Walking Dead. And if we come inside, you can kind of see sort of the ideas that I was having for how to achieve the feelings I was going for on this map. So you'll see we have the farmhouse where you have all these side rooms with, doors that connect each room in multiple areas, which makes the whole thing almost feel like sort of one continuous hallway, except for over here. Look at the light shafts coming through that window. I always like to designate like one area as the comfy spot. someplace with a whole lot of seating, nice comfortable floors so you can have people comfortably laying down there, only one door, but a bunch of windows. And so the idea is that you can come in here with a group of friends, turn on the lights while it remains dark out in the halls, the wood creaking as the house settles in a storm. I feel like the social element is such a big part of Creepy and Comfy. When everyone is together, just kind of, when nothing's happening, but you're all spooked at the same time, and so you feed off of each other. You don't feel like there's any actual danger, but you're all kind of, what's the horror equivalent of giddiness? Have you ever had situations like this where you're over at a friend's house late at night and their house is really old and it's dark outside the room you're hanging out in and you just don't want to leave by yourself? I always used to love that feeling as a kid. Well, now that night has fallen again, I suppose we can get out our lantern and start heading into town. We can actually see the church from over here. Now, getting into town from the residential area means we have to walk the trail through the woods and do not step off it for anything, especially now that we know we're being followed. Although maybe it'll pay to keep an eye out. Wouldn't be much of a video if we didn't see some of our friends. And I really like this idea of having a very different feeling taking this route depending on the time of day. We cross over this bridge over a nice pond, but it really makes you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere during the night. But here we come upon the commercial area. And I've always felt like this whole area was really lazily done, but seeing it now with the shaders, I actually really like it. It's got kind of that wee-woo feeling where, at the same time, you feel like something could come from anywhere, and yet you have nowhere to go. I didn't intend for it to be just one continuous sealed-off street like this, but it kind of works for what it is. Now, there's not really much point in going into these places. You see, we have Blake's Storage tied to another family name that you can find on a residence in town. There's actually this one bookstore over here that actually kind of spooked me out a little bit, even when I built it. It's got kind of that quality that a lot of old small-town bookstores have, where the rows are so dense and cluttered that I just don't like the feeling of not being able to see who else is in here with me, especially if you can't even see the front desk from the front door. Did you just hear something like a squeak? And then once you know you're alone, I've always hated the feeling of walking down the aisles, always thinking I'm going to catch a glimpse of someone. Auto jumping up onto the desk actually helped. But the way there's That was definitely not me. The way there's the one light that doesn't quite reach the back of the room, and so it just falls off into shadow at the end of the aisles. Anybody out here? No? Well, speaking of bookstores, we also have the library over here. And I think I've actually talked about this several times on the channel. I don't know if you can hear that whistling. It's actually starting to storm quite heavily outside. This is actually based on the library that I used to go to as a kid. And now, I'm going to have some things to say about it. Now, this library was this really old, spooky building. I loved it. And so, when I built this map, I built this to be a recreation of it. And I was actually back there a year or two ago they were having a liquidation sale on their old PCs. And I was so shocked to find it looks nothing like this. And it's not because of renovation. When I walked in there, I was like, oh yeah, this is how it was. But it's so weird that the mental image that I had of such a strong memory was so wrong. And it makes me wonder, like, what else that I remember so vividly from my childhood is so incorrect? This would have been like a little alcove area where all like student artwork for the month would be placed. There was a rack here where you could buy books that were for sale. All of this is a representation of something that's real, but it's just not how it actually is. And I don't understand how I could have been so wrong while being so confident that I was right. And it seems like the sun is coming up again. And here we have the children's section, a place where I spent quite a bit of time in my youth. And if we come down roughly this aisle, this is where they kept all the books on ghosts. And there was this one author I used to really, really love called Daniel Cohen, and he would just write books that were essentially compilations of various ghost stories and haunting accounts and myths and legends. I couldn't get enough of his stuff. And there was this one in particular called Hauntings and Horrors, which I would always come down here, grab it from the same spot, sit in this window, and read for hours. I'd probably been through that book like 20 or 30 times in total. I actually managed to track down a copy a couple years ago, so there's one sitting on my shelf right now. And if we come around to here, you'll see something that's inspired by a creepypasta. Some of you might already know what I'm talking about, but if we look out, we can see the sky through these windows, but not so through these. Actually, before I go, I should probably talk about this just a little bit. I would always, as a kid, have dreams about being locked in this children's section overnight. And whether that was a positive or a negative dream depended entirely on whether or not the lights were on. If the lights were off, I was definitely being chased down these aisles by the ghost children that no doubt inhabited it. However, if the lights were on, it was an awesome dream. I could explore all the secrets that I knew had to be there also, in addition to the ghost children. And the ghost children obviously wouldn't bother me because the lights are on. Ghosts can't do stuff when lights are on. Unless, of course, there's one there right now. I was really hoping that would work. Imagine how amazing that would be. But if you'll follow me over here to the adults section, you'll see yet another example of how childhood memories can really mess with you. I made this, as with the rest of the place, as well as I could recall. Now, in reality, this section is by far the largest section of the building, but because I never came over here, I guess I just kind of substituted an image of what this place was like, and I believed for so long that this was what it was. Also, if you look over here in this chest, you'll see we have town records. Like I said, I originally wanted there to be all kinds of mysteries you could solve. The idea being that you might pick up a random year, most of them wouldn't have too much of interest, and you would learn a little bit about the history of the town, and maybe even see a clue that'll turn you on to a whole thing. But if we make our way upstairs, you'll see there's yet another maintenance closet like the one over by the children's section. However, if we go inside, and close the door behind us, there's a button up above it, which leads to the back wall opening up and a hidden hallway. And if we follow this hallway, it leads to this door, which brings us down to the toy room. Now, a lot of people are kind of disappointed by that creepypasta. They feel like it ends a little bit prematurely or anticlimactically. And I couldn't disagree more. I actually don't know what you could add to the ending of that story that wouldn't take away from the mystery and the feeling of dread that you're left with, not knowing what the purpose of this room was, or why some senior members of the staff seemingly don't want anyone to know about it. Also, if you look in this chest, I did once take a day and just piece by piece type out a whole bunch of short creepypastas, which you can pull out of here and read. So there is kind of a reward. It's a nice secret reading spot where nobody's going to bother you. But to get out of here, we just come up these stairs and press this button while standing on this platform, and we are deposited back down into the unassuming maintenance closet by the children's room. It seems like it's getting later, and the rain has started to fall once again. Oh wow, the shader pack is actually doing something I really, really like. It's capturing that sort of greenish-blue look of late afternoon rain. That's the kind of Friday, just got home from school, gonna change into my pajamas early and watch some Fridays on Cartoon Network. Oh, this is beautiful. It's something that you see so little of in media. You know what was a game that actually did it really well was Where's Oswald? But in moody lighting like this, I was just gonna say we have not seen Herobrine in quite a while. He seems to have taken a liking to standing on rooftops in this part. Oh man. I'd kind of gotten used to it in flat mode, but it's getting me every time in VR. And here we come upon the Carpenter Theater, of course named after the director John Carpenter. At the time that I made this map, I think I was just kind of starting to get into Condemned 2, and so a lot of locations are sort of visually inspired by it. This one being the theater from Condemned 2. I don't like that one door being open in the back. I probably did it at some point, but it's still really creepy. Actually, I'm not sure if Herobrine leaves doors open. Oh, look at those leaky roofs. The wooden walls. This actually reminds me of a lot of theaters that I've worked in. So I don't know how many people know this. I've talked about it a couple of times, but prior to YouTube, and even to an extent a little bit during YouTube, I used to work with a friend, and we would offer our services to various stage theaters, and we would record their shows and either make like a little trailer for YouTube for them, or edit the entire thing and sell the DVDs on their behalf. And so I've worked in a lot of old theaters, and they just had this way about them. There's a reason there's so many ghost stories about these places. They have an energy. A lot of them are really, really old and feature kind of spooky construction, especially at night when everyone's left and you're kind of tearing everything down. And you can just feel that this is a place where a lot of very loud and bombastic energies have occupied over the years. When a stage hall goes silent, you kind of, not with your ears, but with your head, hear the echoes of past performances, if that makes any sense. You can just feel that this is a space that's quiet now, but wasn't always, and was never meant to be. There's actually a theater, unfortunately I've never gotten to go inside myself, but there's a theater near me that I really want to do a show in that is so old. Apparently Thomas Edison actually did a demo of the motion picture there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go on that one. I only got to edit. It was a production of Dracula. Well, now that we're out here, let's head towards the church. It can seem almost like either a safe haven or some kind of charm meant to just barely keep the evil things at bay. Just barely indeed, you're not going away. And there you go. I've never seen one walk that far before. It's almost like they're getting bolder. I feel somewhat safe in here. I haven't seen them attempt to enter a structure yet, but we know from our main world that they absolutely will. You can see here there's a couple of newer things. Like, I think at some point I placed these candles down, but I've really barely interacted with this world in the past decade. But these stained glass windows really make me wish that RTX was compatible with Java Edition. I mean, it would probably run like garbage, but still. But what kind of church would it be if it didn't have a creepy basement? So if we can actually manage to wedge ourselves down here, come on. Okay, finally. And this makes no logical sense, but I just love the idea of a man-made canal leading into the church basement with a boat ready to leave at any time. It makes it seem like either there's something nefarious going on now, or something nefarious was going on in this church's past that continues to sit down here unbeknownst to the congregation of today. But here we have the church's secret escape tunnel. This river goes out to wherever. But that's not what we're up to right now, so let's just park this over by the shore and start heading off towards the first of two remote locations. If I can figure out how to get out of the boat. Oh, it's so dark out. We're definitely going to want to carry some sort of light source. And this is going to be a much longer trip. We have to go all the way up into the mountains in order to make our way to the next location. Oh, and I want to talk about that a little bit while we're on the way. You see that cobblestone wall in a square? So way back when I first started this world, I was having an issue with that chunk in particular. Some kind of weird chunk error where it looked completely normal. It wasn't rendering incorrectly, but anything I tried to do with it would sort of behave weirdly. It would do things like revert the state of things that I placed there. My physics would behave weirdly if I tried to walk or fly within. Oh, it's a cow. I thought there was somebody standing there waiting at the edge of the bridge. And in the end, whenever I would interact with that chunk, weird things would happen to the world. It was actually threatening the integrity of the entire save. And so eventually I ended up, for safety, just MC editing this entire thing over to this new world that we find ourselves in now. And now that chunk is fine, but I still leave it there as a reminder of the time some weird, not even eldritch horror, just glitch in reality threatened to destroy the entire town. And here we come upon the next location, the abandoned hospital. Now, if we walk down this way, I actually should probably turn the lights off in this tunnel. I feel like this tunnel itself should be abandoned, and we should have to navigate through with our own light source. But look at that thing. Oh, this is so cool in VR, the way it just looms over everything around it. And it's so dark inside the windows, you can't help but feel eyes on you as you walk past. Well, let's head inside. Ooh, did you see that? I don't know if you can see it, but the way light, like, reflects on those windows on the right side there, at a glance, it almost looked like a light moving between them. Like some old specter rattling chains and dragging a lantern through the hallways. Oh, look at the moonlight reflecting off the glass, but being carried upwards. Although I still don't see any moon in the sky. Maybe it's behind the clouds? Well, let's get exploring. Actually, funny bit of trivia. This was actually inspired by a story I wrote back in high school. And this, in turn, inspired the map that I'm working on for Gary's Mod right now. And for those who have been following that or wondering where it is, that's actually very, very close to release. The map is basically done. I just have to figure out how to upload it to the workshop. You guys will be playing it, hopefully, this month. But here we are. Don't mind me just getting done waiting a full in-game day, since there's no proper way to explore this besides at night. And I didn't want to risk using the command to change the time of day, because I just have a fear that maybe it'll screw up the sightings and maybe cause them to stop spawning. But yeah, second floor psychiatric. Areas like this sort of remind me of what a different person I was 10 years ago. I had hardly done any actual exploring, and nothing at a place like this. And so it kind of shows my ignorance to how a place like this would actually work and be laid out. But I'll tell you what, I got one thing right. Having absolutely no sources of light on the ground floor. I don't remember this at all? Hang on, what is this? I don't remember ever building a basement, which, after our encounter with that weird sewer... well, I guess I never finished it. It's so weird finding things in my own creation that I don't remember placing. But in VR, how narrow these hallways are really stands out, especially advancing by my own light. And I don't know what that water is or where the sounds are coming from. But as I walk through here in the dark, looking into each of these rooms as I go by, I can't help but think that any moment I'm going to see some withered old face staring back at me, lifting its head off a pillow. And here we have floor 2, psychiatric, which in my 18-year-old mind thought that meant padded cells and, I guess, bars within those padded cells leading to a window so that the condemned can grab onto them, shaking back and forth and howling at passersby. Well, let's press on. When I look at this, I can't help but be reminded of my creation, my containment chamber for Herobrine on the survival world. Because it makes me realize that this place is ripe for that same principle. Oh, look at this when we kill our own light. The moonlight pouring in through the windows. It's actually kind of enough. And this is where we find the main stairwell, the one we saw from the lobby. Yeah, the center area was all offices, and from here we can see into the tunnel. Well, let's go upstairs then from here. And I don't remember there being anything particularly significant up here. I think it's mostly, yeah, it's just more patient rooms. Up here, the moonlight is even stronger. I love those little pieces of light that cast onto the ground. It's incredible what shaders can do to this game. How much one little mod like Optifine can completely change the experience. Especially now that we have the ability to carry our own light sources. But if we climb up here into the attic, you can see the peak of this. The best view of the surrounding area, which, sitting in a valley like this, isn't really too much. It kind of makes you wonder what the purpose of building this here in the first place was. And then when you yourself are up here staring down at the tunnel entrance, the same one you can imagine seeing yourself arrive on from this angle, well, you start to feel like you've become the ghost. I always talk about that, how that's how I feel watching people go by from the window of an abandoned building. But there's still just a little bit more to see here. If we come over here, you'll see these irregular stairwells. They actually go down to the first floor, but their destination cannot be accessed from the first floor. And this is the stairway to the morgue. I also find it creepy how it's a stairwell that bypasses the second floor altogether. Now, granted, this is just because I didn't have a lot of experience with what they would look like at the time. but I feel like it's quite weird to have a morgue that has tables to simultaneously work on 8 bodies. And because of the way these cold storage doors are done, well, they look more like cells than storage. Well, I'm grateful we managed to avoid an encounter while in those halls. But I think it's time for us to be getting a move on. Look at that. The shadows slowly creeping up the side. Almost like some kind of reverse hourglass until the entire place is completely covered in darkness. Were we to be up in those hallways right now, we would find that we don't have those shafts of moonlight coming through. These shaders are absolutely amazing. I definitely think we're going to be trying for at least one episode to carry all this forward into the main series. Look at the way the sun casts over the sea. Now as we arrive back at the residential area, it's time for us to start heading to the second remote location, and what's personally my favorite part of the map. But it is going to be quite a long journey for us to get there. And we'll be doing it through the night. I love the way the moonlight casts over the trees. That is so cool. But in order to do that, we'll have to make our way through this tunnel. A tunnel which, in my opinion, is actually a lot creepier during the day, acting as a gulf of darkness between 2 areas in full daylight. Before we do that, let's have a quick look at the graveyard, since you can't do it yourself through the iron fences. Can I help you? She's embarrassed. And if you come here, you'll see graves belonging to members of families that you can find around town, as well as a few references to horror literature and media. Oh wow, this tunnel is actually much longer than I remember. So long, in fact, that something could come out at the end or behind us. This kind of actually reminds me of, you remember that Hey Arnold episode where they were in the park trying to, I don't remember what they were trying to do, but they had told each other all kinds of scary stories, so they were all freaked out. Actually, a very creepy and comfy episode in and of itself in that feeling. And one of them was they were anticipating a man with a hook for a hand at the end of the tunnel. Nobody here, though. Ah, except for... I was hoping it would happen, and it did, and I learned careful what you wish for. Okay, let's continue then. That's kind of cool, actually, how you can only really see the orange hue of the leaves as you pass under them. You stop moving in the dark, chicken. Oh, that's going to color the mood of the entire rest of the trip. The moonlight is somewhat comforting, the lantern light more comforting, yet somehow the net result isn't comfort, but here we are. We cross this stone bridge and we can just make out the side of the lodge. Now remember what I was saying earlier, I built this map at around the time I played Condemned 2, and I was taking a whole lot of inspiration. That was by far my favorite area of that game. Just this decrepit old cabin left to rot up in the snowy wilderness. The door left open, letting in a draft. Once again, I probably did this, but not knowing for sure is a big problem for me. Old hunting trophies displayed. I'm not sure what the purpose of these torches is, or if I indeed placed them. They seem, well, redundant seems a little bit too generous of a word. Now, let me talk a little bit about the philosophy when it comes to the design of a place like this when it was being built. I wanted this location to be the ultimate culmination of every idea I had brainstormed about the creepy and comfy feeling. And in doing so, I want to think that this place combines a lot of different ideas, some of which may seem contradictory in order to achieve that aim. So you have areas like this that are a wide open space. A nice comfy bar and, a roaring fire. But it's in this huge cavernous room. It's the kind of thing where you're very safe in this area in front of the fire, but even within this contained space, what should be the insulation from the creepy outside, it doesn't quite feel that way. Because while you're fine here, you've got all these blind areas up on the balcony above. The light from the fire doesn't quite reach the edges of the chamber. And so it's almost like camping indoors. In contrast with that, you come down these hallways like this, things that are sort of separate from the main hangout spots. You know your friends are right there, but they might not quite be able to get to you in time if something were to happen. Now, to contrast that, you have areas like these that are more of a traditional hangout spot. You have a couple of doors that you might want to keep an eye on, including an open one right here. Taxidermy all around, leering at you as you sit. And of course, you have the darkened windows onto the night outside. And so, just within this area, got a skeleton jump scare just now. Just within this area, you have two very different kinds of comfort and fear. Now, if we head upstairs from here, we can go over and explore the areas with the actual rooms. And I just love how sort of needlessly complex this all is. If we come down here, we can walk down to the side entrance. But we come up here and gain access to the beds. Once again, sort of a safe area, your own personal bubble, rather than a friend bubble. But to get here, you have to come into these more narrow, cramped hallways where you can't see around the corners, and you feel like something could be peering around any angle, especially if you head off to bed early. Everyone else is still telling stories. You maybe got just a little bit too spooked by one and you decide to bow out. But now you have to wee-woo and make your way all the way up here alone in the dark. Now, you're supposed to be safe in these little bubbles, but I kind of haven't made it that way because, look, any one of your friends who decides to snap could just as easily hop over these balconies and slip into your room at night. Now, I've spoken before about how I have kind of a fascination with architecture that seemingly randomly changes elevation even within the space of one floor. But to add on to that, I also have an appreciation of really redundant connections, almost like a Chutes and Ladders-esque thing where rooms will connect onto each other in hallways in ways that shouldn't really be that way, or that don't need to be that way. And it makes a space, even one that's not that complicated, feel a lot more complex and a lot easier to get lost in. It's really weird to be lost in a maze where everything seems familiar and everything is, I was just here. I see somebody still creeping around the outside, which actually is an excellent way to seg into my next point. Thank you, Herobrine. I really love the isolated nature of places like this. Looking out into the forest below and seeing not a hint of light or civilization. I always talk about how creepy and comfy is about a feeling of danger, but an insulation from that danger. But in a place like this, it's as if there were an incomplete insulation. Like, you have chambers within this space that feel safe, you have hallways connecting them that feel a little less safe, and then you have the outside, which is just straight up red alert danger. All of this is better than that, but you don't really want to be away from the group. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this is perfect. Because earlier, I was kind of thinking out loud about how friends are such a huge part, not maybe a necessary part, but definitely a useful component of the creepy and comfy sensation. Even when nothing is happening, you're kind of bouncing each other's feelings off of each other, validating each other in that fear, and almost crafting an entire story out of no real events. Every creak of a floorboard essentially being a new plot beat in a horror story that isn't happening. And because you all match each other's mood, you just amplify that mood off of each other. And those are just some of the most fun experiences you can possibly have. Because as long as you're with each other, you don't feel like you're in any real danger. It's just a shared feeling of, well, like I said, is there a word for giddiness and fear? I don't know, but it sounds like Herobrine is mostly content to keep to the outskirts of this place. Haven't actually seen him spawn indoors yet, I don't think. At least on this world. Although, I do still have a fear that he'll decide to pop by the windows at some point. And it is so cool to come back to a nostalgic world like this. Hello. The way the light reflected in two pieces on the glass, it almost looked like a couple of glowing eyes staring at me from the trees. But yet, coming back to a world that I have such memories of from so long ago, and having it seemingly corrupted in this way, like some other consciousness has inhabited it, much like it changed the game of Minecraft itself in survival mode, it's changed my whole perception of this place. I actually wonder if you were to use commands to bring about an eternal night and rain and thunderstorm, and get a few friends together who have VR and just kind of hang out in this place, especially with From the Fog enabled, what kind of experiences you might have in it. And now there's some sort of external stimulus to make you feel that way. Something that can't hurt you, but which can very much set you on edge and allow you to do the rest with your own imagination, wondering what's out there, wondering what's walking these halls. How cool would it have been if he was staring at me from that window right there? But yeah, just sort of a special episode, side thing, meant to kill some time so you wouldn't have to wait a full week between parts while I'm so busy. And this has been really fun. And if you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more creepy and comfy content. If you have any ideas for other videos you think I should do, the best place to suggest that will be at the Discord, which I will link in the description. If you want to try this mod out for yourself, that link will also be in the description. If you want to try this map, that link will be in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next one.